Live, my attention's on you.
Yes.
I'm just doing this for, the people who can't be here.
I think a lot of people are going to watch it because there was interest, and like even people that I sent it to, they unfortunately they were working and they couldn't make it, but they were
Okay, awesome, that's great. So then,
I'm also going to share it with other people.
cool. So let's hope it works. Don't. Yeah. So I hope someone pops on and then I can ask them if they can hear me. I know all of you, thousands of people, but I'm going to introduce myself for the video. First, thanks for coming. Thanks for staying. Thanks for being here.
I'm going to cry soon, so just carry on.
Okay. That's cool.
Clean up the puddles.
Right, make room. Okay.
You're welcome.
Thank you for coming. Carolina, thank you. I really like you as a person very much. It's a pleasure to know you, and thank you for the community of human beings, for the work that you do with your team, Nefashot. It's so, I'm going to cry now. It's invaluable. There's just no, you can really, it's hard to qualify the value of it. It's really, it's limitless. And I feel very honored to be a part of this initiative. Really, really do. So thank you. Thank you so much. I'm Liba Lurie. I'm a clinical psychologist. I also have 4 kids, and I'm the creator of a project called Motherhood in the Making. And I started this project because when I became a mother, I realized just how hard it was. In spite of thinking that I would have everything together and I would be totally I had it made. I was the best camp counselor. I was the best babysitter. I knew how to raise everybody else's kids. And then I had my own, and I was confronted with what seemed like insurmountable struggles that were unexpected. Luckily, I, like all psychologists, went to figure out what's going on with me. And I have a dedication to understanding what's going on. That's just, who I am, and that's why I'm in this profession. What I discovered was mind-blowing for me, because I thought, wait, how come no one knows this? How come this isn't part of what I know? The way, I don't know, think of something we take for granted, that we just know how things work. Like that I'm going to have a baby. Well, I'm a woman, and I want to have kids, so I'm going to be the one to have a baby. It's just a known thing. How come these things aren't known? How come I don't know these things? Why don't I know this? I don't benefit from it, and my kids, I'm scared my kids are going to suffer as well, the way I suffered, because my mother didn't know, and her mother didn't know. And when I say mother, but I also don't exclude fathers, because we know fathers are also really important. Because mothers tend to be, right now, culturally, the primary caregivers of children, and because we are the ones who hold and birth, and in many cases, nurse our children. So we are physically connected to the experience of motherhood. As a fatherhood is a different experience. And so Motherhood in the Making was born because I felt that it was my mission to let people in on what I have discovered, because it helped me. I'm a different person, and I have, I'm calmer. These are my catchphrases. I feel calmer. I feel more in control. I feel confident that I'm building loving and lasting relationships with my kids. And more importantly, I'm just happy. And what I will say is, most importantly, I'm happy. I'm happy in life. So I come to you today with this event, Motherhood Matters, the myths and facts of maternal mental health. What I found as I started to, to put out ideas, to share ideas, I opened a Facebook group, the Motherhood in the Making community, and I found that a lot of people who were coming to the group, it was I can't tell you statistically, but it was really 50-50. Women were coming in saying, I'm here because I want to feel more patient, with a focus on myself and my experience of motherhood. Many people were coming in, understandably, because they wanted to understand how to manage their kids' behaviors. And that struck me. It struck me in that, granted, there's something to say about marketing. What do women understand about this group when they come in? But the way Facebook works is when you come into a group, you really don't know that much. And despite what I've written in the description, I think when we say motherhood, we think what we should be doing. We don't think about how I should be being. And we don't look internally. Our focus is external, in the role, in the job. And we pay very little attention to ourselves and our own experience. So today I want to talk about issues pertaining to maternal mental health. Particularly, I want to promote this idea that issues pertaining to maternal mental health are under-recognized and under-treated. That I really need to emphasize that. What does that mean? It means nobody knows it's happening and nobody's getting help. Mental health awareness ensures that those who need help know it, value it, and get access to it. Because what I find often, now this is understandable, right? If I'm struggling, and I'm thinking of all human beings right now and all of our complexity and individuality, when I'm struggling, I'm going to move into a state of survival, and I'm going to use all the tools that I've collected unconsciously and sometimes consciously over my life, particularly in the beginning, when I was most vulnerable, to make sense of it. And sometimes what we do is we pretend it's not happening. And sometimes what we do is we toughen up and we charge on. And it happens to be that as women, that is the expectation of us, that we are tough and we are strong. And that's promoted on both sides of the feminist coin. You have to be a strong woman, but you also have to be strong because you have to nurture men. So I'm going to start by talking about maternal mental health versus women's health. And that's important because when you think about maternal mental health, you think about, what do you think about?
It seems like it's a pocket. Like, I think we started talking about it here. That leading up to birth.
Yeah.
And then following that birth, and like once mat leave is over, whatever that is, wherever you're from, it almost seems like that's it. That's the pocket of the mental health that people are focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have this defenseless little baby, and God forbid, like your mind is not there.
Right.
Like you said before, that's who you're protecting.
Right. Exactly.
Not to turn this to me, but I will. Like I have a 4.5-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an 8-year-old, and I'm struggling with whatever's going on for me and trying to still figure it out.
Right.
Especially in the last 6 months. And this morning I started crying, and I heard my daughter asking my husband as they're walking up the stairs, "Why is mommy crying?" And it was like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, am I supposed to go into my room and cry? I don't know why I'm crying.
Right.
And then I don't want it to be like something that's like hiding in a closet, and then you open up the closet and there's mommy crying.
Right. But where does this belong? Where do I belong here? Yeah.
If it's part of motherhood, or it's just part of like hormonal changes, or like whatever aspect of that, it needs to be addressed.
Right.
Like my first instinct was like, I'm not staying for this. I'm gonna go run upstairs and I'm gonna like work. And I was like, no, I actually think I really need to be here.
Right. I am glad you stayed. I'm really glad you stayed. And yeah, when I thought about this event and this program, and I started to research and sort out my ideas so they would make sense. I started to look at, well, what is maternal mental health? And then I'm like, well, you start to Google it, and it's all about postpartum. It's all postpartum. Yeah. And now there's recognition for antenatal, which means during pregnancy, which is really actually, there's a law, like it's quite common. And now it's being recognized, now it's been included into the 5th edition of the DSM. Which we're gonna talk about. And we're gonna talk about that, yes. So maternal mental health versus women's mental health, the value of there being a category dedicated to the experience of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum is that we acknowledge that it's real. That the struggles that happen for a woman in this period of her life are real, ! They include unique experiences and physiological changes in our bodies. and psychological vulnerability. And it's important that we, let's say in English, like really put our, yeah, like to really put our, to pinpoint that this matters and this is important and this is real. And I think that's the most, because when we get into struggle, and this I encounter a lot with my clients, is, am I crazy? Am I crazy? We judge it as opposed to recognizing, no, this is real. When it isn't just the blues, it's more important that it's validated. Now, the baby blues I will talk about because it's important if you're coming here and you're wanting more information about this specific period in a woman's life cycle, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, which includes the 12 months after birth, I should define. There is a normal period after birth when a woman's hormones shift drastically and she experiences a drop in her mood. It's very, very common. When it extends past a few days, continues for a couple of weeks, then it's not just is it important, but it's beneficial to reflect, to acknowledge that maybe this isn't normal. I don't like these words normal, and we're going to talk about this, normal, not normal. It's important again that we give words for things and definitions like maternal mental health, so that we can understand certain things, but it always leaves something out. So the word normal, you leave something, things are left out. But for the what's normal, we'll use it. I feel like I could talk about that on like a whole different thing about how we, considering the stigma of mental health, how we judge our experience. So what's normal, I'm cautious around this because it's like food for our own self-judgment. And
that's why I doctor said typical instead
yes,
of normal.
I like that, right, with autism, typical and atypical.
Like common.
Yes.
And I literally, my first thought was the word normal,
Mm-hmm.
and then I thought, no, this is not about normal.
Right, it's typical. Here's the bottom line. So let me fast forward here, okay? Here's the bottom line. How do I feel about it? Am I okay with this? Like, forget the definitions, forget the terminology, forget the categories. How do I feel? That's what matters most. And the tagline of Motherhood in the Making is you matter. So going back to maternal mental health versus women's mental health, it's important that we acknowledge that the experience of a woman exists. These unique experiences sometimes are distressing. They are real and they exist. They range from, the blues to depression, anxiety, and psychosis. And they can be extreme, they can be very frightening. And people around us get very scared. And it's important that it is scary. It is scary. And so, Julie, I'm looking at you and I'm saying it is scary. It is scary. People are scared because it is scary. But it is real. And I think it's important that this is real. Somehow, I'm crazy, somehow makes it not important anymore. Crazy people don't matter. No, crazy people matter. Everyone matters, right?
But it's directly connected to the stigma around mental health.
Right. Well, if you think about mental health and mental illness, it's very recent. It's like 100, just over 100 years old that people weren't in a psychosis, weren't locked away and chained up. More like
60 years.
Yeah, right. Or women. So going into the women's experience, that women were mistreated as well in their postpartum experiences.
Well, the word hysterical.
Mm-hmm. Hysteria. Yeah, that's right.
Comes from
Right.
It's
Right.
connected with birth.
Right. So, once a mother, always a mother. This distinction between maternal mental health and women's mental health, as important as this distinction is, so that we can acknowledge the experience of women in this period of their life, it suggests that once you're no longer postpartum, your mental health as it relates to your identity, your role, and your relationships as a mother are irrelevant. And it's implicit. No one's going to tell you this. No one's going to say it. But like Rachel was saying, I don't understand. I'm having trouble making sense of this, because where does this fit in everything that I know about mental health? We know now thank God, about postpartum depression. It's part of our vernacular, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, psychosis. It's not foreign to us completely. But past those 12 months, everyone falls off the radar. It's like you don't exist. And this is a big problem. This is a big, big problem, that women come into my group and the way that they express their struggle is through their children's behavior. That's a problem for two reasons. First of all, they're putting it out on their children, and now their children are being pulled into it, and it is perpetuating the problem, because now we are continuing this pattern where our kids are playing into it, and we're just trying to figure our shit out. And the second problem with it is, I don't have my shit together, and I feel crappy. I feel like a failure. I'm scared. I'm out of control. I'm irritable. I'm mad at myself, and I don't know what to do about it. And what that means is that instead of being happy and fulfilled and enjoying my life and feeling like I'm productive and I matter and I'm important, I feel like a failure. And I'm failing myself, I'm failing my kids. It's a shit show. I'm being extreme. With caution. No, because I anticipate someone hearing this. Hi, everybody. I anticipate a woman watching this, and I'm cautious, and I want to mention this because I had this experience as well. When I was I was sitting in these sort of university chairs, I remember in Australia in my master's degree, and learning about the theories and thinking, oh my God, and it's frightening me. It was really frightening me. So I'm giving an extreme case, but if you're thinking, oh shit, that could be me, notice that you're going to fear and judgment, and listen to my voice and bring it back to just pay attention to what that feels like. Because if you're scared, it's your fear and your judgment is actually telling you to pay attention to something. What should you be paying attention to? Maybe I'm not feeling good, and that matters. That really matters if you don't feel good. As women, we are not socialized in general to value our experience, right? And everybody's like, yes, that is correct. Like, do I need to bring evidence? Does anyone question that Rachel, I know you won't disagree, that as women, we are socialized to not pay attention to our needs. We don't put ourselves first. So this is, I mean, we have to change the way that we think, not just about mental health, but of ourselves as women, and our role and our value. And it's not just for the sake of our children, but it's for our own sake, which brings me to my next point. Whose mental health really matters here? Because maternal mental health, as I was saying to you, Rachel, the whole idea of maternal mental health historically was developed when it became evident that children were being affected by their mother's moods. That over time it became clear that children's development, their emotional cognitive development, was related to their mother's mood, and particularly in the period postpartum, where people used to think, oh, it's a baby, it's a blob, it doesn't really matter. We do understand that these months after birth, hi, Daniela, you made it. Make yourself comfortable. Don't, you're not bothering anybody, Daniela, okay? Just do what you need to do, okay? Here's some papers if you want.
Okay, yes, sure.
I'm really happy to see you.
Thank you.
In person and here. Yeah. Yeah, and Ramilani. Oh, it's so good. Oh, so good. Yeah, good. I'm glad this is the reason. Excuse, whatever. I'm really honored. So maternal mental health sort of this idea comes to our awareness, is developed. This concept is developed because of we see that children are being affected. Now that's okay, I suppose, because it's important that we're paying attention to our children, and we're seeing that that's a good thing, that we're paying attention to children and children's emotional development and their cognitive development, and we're asking what's really going on here, and we're seeing that the relationship is important. That's something very powerful. The relationship is important. Unfortunately, what I think it has also contributed to, and not in an explicit way, but sort of in a passive way, to the idea that you're important because now you need to serve your baby, and if you're not well, your baby won't be well. So the attention is on the baby, and the focus is less on the mother. It's only as a means to an end, and no one says it, but there's a taste of it, that I have to be well. And if I am struggling, then I feel like a failure because I know that. I know that I have this little child who depends on me, and it's freaking the shit out of me. Because I know that I'm important. I know that I'm important. But I'm really struggling here. But I don't value myself. Am I really that important? But I don't think I'm important as an individual, but I know I'm important to this kid. There's this disconnect and this dissonance, not with everybody, but is common. And it's important that overall, so I'm just so distracted by your baby right now. I'm also distracted that I'm talking about this and you're 3 weeks postpartum. And I'm just like...
You're doing much better than last time around. Had you had this course last time around, I would have been like here all the time.
You would have been here on time? What do you mean?
Like I would have made it more of a let's make sure we hear this because this is what happened to me last time around. Just kind of a lot better.
Right. It feels less like dachuf.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad you were late.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. This book,
No, it doesn't belong to us.
no?
That was next to the water.
Maybe somebody in the class?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So if you're here, can you tell me, Tora, I think you're here with me. Can you tell me if you can hear me? I'm assuming you can because you're still here. So what's the point here? The point is that while it's important that we pay attention to this period of a woman's life cycle, we have to acknowledge that this is part of a big picture of motherhood as a whole, and that my experience as an individual is important. And if you follow me at all, so I sort of laughed at that idea that you might follow me. If you read what I write, if you're, then you know that this is what I talk about a lot. I talk about this a lot because in some ways it's obvious, because it's like, well, you have to fill your cup to fill someone else's. And I just did a video last week where I said, who cares about other people's cups? Fill your own cup because your cup needs to be full. And that's that. And that's enough because you deserve a full cup, period, full stop. Not because you need to do it for anybody else. Because that in itself, this adage, fill your cup to fill someone else's, presupposes that it's paradoxical. If I'm so focused on filling other people's cup, I'm only filling it for someone else's. How do I ever get my cup full? How do I ever get my cup full? Because their cup's never full. Their cup is never full. So I'm never going to get my cup full. So it's important that we bring attention to women as mothers, that we matter. It's important. Our experience matters. Postpartum and beyond.
I wonder when it shifts, because as a single person, you put yourself first all the time. Whether it's going out with friends or making sure to get your mani-pedi or you're waxing every week, it shifts somehow when you become a mom. I don't know why.
What shifts? Hi, welcome.
The importance of where you put yourself. I have to put myself first because someone needs me, as opposed to, obviously I'm putting myself first because all there is me.
Right. Good point. Okay, so what happens is, yes, you're right. You have to put yourself first. The emphasis of putting yourself. Now I have to put before I had a kid, I didn't have to even think about it.
Okay.
Now I have to actually think about it. Because if I don't think about it, I'm just giving, because it's so demanding. It's not like I'm giving because I'm like altruistic. I'm giving because this kid won't stop crying if I don't do it, or like I have to. I'm keeping a child alive. I'm a good person, and I'm also instinctively driven to do that. It's very taxing. It's very taxing, and we're going to talk about this on the next page, where we talk about the experience, what happens for mom, and it's very significant what happens for mom, And if mom doesn't pay attention to what's going on just for her, she has a really hard time setting limits and making space for herself between her kid and being okay. So what happens? You ask a question. I feel like this is a big question. What's the shift? What's your question? Say it again, because I feel like I'm missing the question. What happens when you become a mom?
Like, when does your importance to yourself get lowered? When is it shifted away from top priority?
Okay, so it doesn't actually change. You're just confronted with what was always there. That's often, not always. Often what motherhood does is, and we're going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about like psychodynamically, like what happens when I say psychodynamically, I'm not talking about thoughts or behaviors. I'm talking deep in our emotions. Like, what do we know that happens when you bring a person into the world? And we're going to talk about that. It is a significant shift, and I'm glad you asked that. And coming back to the point, generally we don't know that. People aren't aware of that. And so when it happens, it's unconscious to us. It's not in our awareness. And when it has its impact, we're left feeling confused and lost and like failures, like sometimes, but this is a normal process. So we're going to talk about that. What's your name? You look very familiar.
I'm Eliana.
Oh, yes, good. I'm like, that's probably Eliana.
Yes.
Hi.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry. You get my message about the mix-up in time?
Yeah, but I have to bring a car in, so.
Okay, no worries. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for coming,
Yes.
because you could so easily just be, So thank you. I really appreciate it. It's good to meet you in person. Have we met in person?
Yes.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I know you. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's talk about what happens what do we know? I wanted to bring this the experience of a mom. Like, what happens around? How do I say this? I'm going to give you a story. When I gave birth to my first daughter, when she was a year old, we moved to Australia. I was married a year. She was a year old. We moved. So I married 2 years. She's a year old, and we moved to Australia. I'm from Toronto, just to give you some just to give you an idea. And I get an invitation in the mail, or what, I think it was in the mail, a letter. They have pretty good medical care there, I suppose, and thank you. Anyways, I get this letter inviting me to see the child health nurse. Cool, okay. I don't know how things work. I don't know how things work as a mother, and I don't know how things work in Australia. So that was cool. I showed up, and this lady, a little suspicious, a little cautious, because that was my way of interacting with the world at the time, which made sense at the time. And I didn't know what was going on. So that just heightened my sense of suspicion and caution. And she's asked me all these questions that I don't think are her business. Like, how much does your baby eat? Which I interpret as criticism. Like, I have to prove myself. I feel very much like I have to prove myself to her, prove that I'm a good mom, prove that I'm good enough. There's this fear that you're going to find me out. I'm going to be just, and the biggest fear, which may not be rational, but the biggest fear is you're going to take my baby away. That's the biggest fear. I should tell you, my daughter was born a little bit premature. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that she was born with a condition that required her to be hospitalized for an unknown amount of time at the time. It turned out to be 10 weeks. She was fine, nothing long term, but she doesn't like me talking about it. That's why I'm not talking about it. And I want to honor that, because she may see this one day down the line, and I want her to know that I honor it. And she, there's no long-term damage, thank God. So she wasn't sick, but she needed to be repaired. She needed to heal. She needed time to heal in the hospital. And I think that's actually brings me back, this kind of, like, that's the difference. It's not about being sick or ill when we talk about diagnosis. It's about healing. It's about feeling well. When we talk about, I think we talked about this, but when we talk about mental health, I'm going to get into this, so I'm going to pause, but, tick, 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 the gears are shifting. It's great when you, are struggling with this, concept, and you're like, oh, this is that you get clarity. So, furthermore, this mental health nurse hands me this nice little questionnaire. You can see it. I gave you a copy of it. She hands me this questionnaire. Now, I should say, did you get papers, Eliana?
They give this out to stuff a lot.
Yes, they do.
It at like 3
She
months.
diagnosed me. She's like, based on the questionnaire,
Based on your
questions, like he's gonna party.
I'm like, I'm also for a little, and I cry over everything.
But sometimes they don't do anything about it.
Uh-huh.
Listen, it's good that they do.
For sure.
Kind of screening, right?
No, yes, it's good that they do the screening, but they also, it's a lot of responsibility to officially diagnose someone.
They should not have actually said that.
Yeah.
I hope the video's capturing your voices, because this is just like, this is exactly why I bring this up, because we've all had this. We're like, on one hand, I'm glad they're asking. At least there's like muda'ut, like awareness to it. On the other hand, fuck off, excuse me. You know? Like, this, do you have any idea what's going on inside here? Do you, wait a minute, sorry. Do you even remember my name? No, don't look in your file. Do you know what my name is? And you're going to give me this, which I think is what you're saying, Caroline. Like, this is a big deal. What I'm experiencing right now is really big. And this really minimizes my experience. On the other hand, for some women, this is an absolute godsend. Thank God. Now I can tell you. Now I can say something. Most women, and if you look down, the problem with these subjective tests, and you should know a lot of what we know empirically about postpartum depression is through these not subjective tests.
Statistical.
Self-report measures.
Right.
These self-report measures. There are problems with these self-report measures. And I'm going to try not to get emotional, because I tend to get emotional over these things. My husband's always like, chill out. Thank you. Used to be upset about it, but like, well, thank you. Yes, okay, you're bringing it, you know. Because there's I feel a sense of injustice, you know, a real sense of injustice. Why? Because I was struggling. I was having a very hard time. And in retrospect, you know, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Now that I'm well, I didn't know how unwell I was. I don't know how unwell I am. So when you ask me this, well, and this particular postpartum depression, please circle the answer which comes closest to how you felt in the past 7 days. Sorry, what day is it today?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I haven't really, wait, what? Oh, 7 days, what happened like a week ago? Like, I don't even remember what happened a week ago. Which is, you know, my cognitive functioning is impaired because I'm not sleeping. And if I'm anxious, my cognitive functioning is impaired. And you know, like, the height of anxiety is like in a trauma, right? Like the height of anxiety, and let's tone it down a little bit. I'm going for a walk. I love this example because it's hilarious. I'm walking around my neighborhood, you know, getting some exercise in whenever, not much. And I walk by this house, and inevitably there's this dog. This dog, you know, these dogs that out of nowhere run up to the gate and bark at you, right? And I'm just like, holy Jesus fucking Christ! And like, what? Like, that's inappropriate. I'm in the middle of my neighborhood, and I scream out obscenities. I would never think to ever do that consciously, except for here, of course, in this space. Like, I would never, you know, I wouldn't scream that out. And as anxious, you know, because when you're anxious, or when you're in an emotionally heightened state, whether it be anxiety, fear, whatever, by the way, these things, these emotions are not so cut and dry. They kind of just sometimes blend into a mess. You're not thinking straight. You know, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. Things happen automatically, right? So now you're asking me to now focus on this, and I don't know you, and I don't know what these results mean. So now, you know, I don't know what this means. And I don't know what, you know, I'm scared. This scares me. I see this as, you know, at any time, and I'm scared. And they're hard to answer. And let's talk about these tests.
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
Connected to what you said about
Yeah.
trauma and
Yeah.
anxiety. That childbirth is a traumatic experience to your body, right? Any kind of the most beautiful, easy birth is still a trauma to your physical.
Yeah, because you face death.
and the excruciating pain
Yeah.
and the fear of like something going wrong and
yeah.
everything else.
Yeah.
And then there's no time to process. So in effect, postpartum women, especially right after birth, are experiencing some kind of PTSD or post-anxiety because of the stress on our physical body that nobody really talks about.
100%. And I remember one of my least scary births. And when I say it was least scary, is because I was most aware, and it was the most predictable birth.
Was it the second?
Yes, and it was the most predictable. It was most predictable. So I wasn't scared. I wasn't surprised by anything. I didn't feel out of control. It was so predictable by the book. And nevertheless, I afterwards reflected, because I was so present that I could be like, wow, birth, when you bring life into this world, you face death. You face death to bring life in. And you say that, and they'll call you crazy.
What do you mean by that? You face that?
You face death because you feel you know transition, that point where you're like, I can't do this. I'd rather die. Like, I think I might die. I think this is going to kill me. I'd rather die, or I'm so, like, I feel like my brain is interpreting this experience as, this is death. This is going to bring my death. And then you have a supportive woman next to you who says, this is bringing life. And you go, oh, push. And our bodies, when it's predictable, and it's not, and this is what also, it's not always predictable, but when it is, and there is that transition, and there's that quiet moment between transition and then the urge to push. I should just say my last 2 births were like 45 minutes long, so it was just all in one. But there's this moment of clarity, and it's a profound moment, and it's very profound. Birth is extremely profound. It is creation. And so even in, and I was actually sharing this with my husband, God bless him. He's like, I'm so tired. I'm like, no, you have to help me. Like, I need to review this. I need to make sure this makes sense. And he's like, whoa. He's like, existentially, he added, what happens? It's so profound. You're bringing life. It's, but Eliana, you're pointing out something else. What you're pointing out is the fear. The fear that is encompassed, and that many women aren't told this, it's not acknowledged, and it's important that we acknowledge this.
I read a definition that trauma is fear coupled with helplessness and pain, which is basically what we experience.
Yeah.
Trauma is when you're experiencing fear coupled with helplessness and physical pain or imminent danger.
Right. So.
And if everyone were just more educated on viewing it like that, then maybe they would give themselves more space to heal.
And maybe the medical system would show more honor to a woman's experience and create spaces that are less scary and less helpless. Women are often helpless because women in the medical system are not women as a gender. Well, let me start with the benefits, okay, before I go to the problems. The benefits they're cheap and they're easy. So if I'm doing a study, I mean, to give this out to women, it's so cheap. It doesn't cost me much money, it doesn't cost me any time, and it's easy to administer to a lot of people. So this is what we know about postpartum depression is oftentimes based on these measures. The problem with these measures is that though they may be able to say who qualifies and who doesn't. You can't diagnose from this. Okay, you can't make a diagnosis from this, but it can sort of flag women. It can say who may have and who may not be, experiencing symptoms of depression or anxiety, etc. But it does not show any quality. You don't know the story. So when you're doing big studies and you're just using this, what we know very little about the nuances. It's very black and white what we know. This also relies on the honesty of the subjects. So like I said, I came into the mental health nurse's office infant health nurse's office, clinic, whatever, and I wasn't honest with her because I was scared and I was defensive, and therefore I was defensive and I was going to tell her. Not only did I not want to admit to her, I don't want to admit it to myself. also when you do these tests, like I remember actually being in Toronto before I moved to Australia. I remember the postpartum distress measure, which I found online, and I wasn't sure if I was interpreting it right, because like, I don't know, I cannot make decisions or concentrate. Sorry, wait, I have to read that. Wait, let me read that again. You know, I'm exhausted. I can't make decisions and concentrate. Wait, but am I exhausted because my baby's waking a lot? Am I exhausted because is that a reflection of a psychological condition? I feel overwhelmed. Yeah, I feel overwhelmed. This is my first baby, and I don't know if I'm doing it right. Yeah, sure, I feel overwhelmed. I'm afraid I'll never feel better. No, I'm not.
Talk about coping well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What is overwhelming? So when it comes to these measures, interpretation and understanding the questions influences the responses. There are some things here that are, you know, I check on my baby multiple times throughout the night. Everyone has a sense of what that might indicate, that I'm getting up to check on my baby a lot.
Yes,
What would motivate that behavior?
is that like the...
Okay,
supposed to be
so as a okay, cool, that's cool, because as a psychologist, this is an indication, this indicates something to me, but as a mom, or as, you know, as the audience, you're saying, wait, well, what is normal? Wait, what is normal? What is typical? What is typical? You know, am I checking my baby because, so what that means to me is, what this is telling me is that if I'm anxious, I won't know that I'm anxious. If I'm feeling heightened levels of fear and discomfort and distress, I may think that that's normal and that's typical and that's how I should be doing. You know?
I think that's what society tells us, that we should be some high level of neurotic/anxious all the time about our kids.
Right. You're going to be a good mom, right?
Like, can I tell you a story?
Sure.
Very short. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, my son was bit by a dog in the park. And I asked a legal question. By law, is the dog owner required to produce some kind of forms so that we didn't have to go take him to get the Kalevet shots, Erev Rosh Hashanah, Erev Yom Kippur, and twice during Chol Moed Sukkot?
And they hurt.
And he's a kid, and whatever, it doesn't matter. And the responses I got online, which is why I never post online because I'm always like upset by it so much, but were like, well, was it your kid's fault that he got hit? You have to teach your kid to be vigilant at the park. And I'm like, this is our neighborhood park that we frequently go to, like 5 times a week, and where it's like our backyard. He's supposed to be in a play zone. He's not supposed to be hyper vigilant about like if someone's about to attack him. That's a not normal state, in my opinion. I want to create an environment where he can play freely. Hence, don't bring a big dog who can bite kids into a kid's park.
Was the dog on a leash?
He was on a leash, but he was inside the kids' park next to the swing with no supervision. My son just walked by. He was la 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 playing. He was
So no.
running around in
So he
circles.
wasn't. He might
He
have.
put his hands out and the dog attacked him.
Oh.
And luckily he's okay, thank God. He had to get the shots. But I'm saying,
Right.
like, what is this? Is like, so I'm supposed to be so scared of my kids walking down the street that they can't have any imaginative play time in their head. Like,
Right.
is
Or
that
somehow
how-
this was my fault. Somehow I should have done something, this is my fault. Which thanks, I already feel shitty about this.
The society of like the expectation of a mother to be so.
Well, you have to, otherwise, because otherwise when bad things happen, it's your fault, and you're a bad mother. And so, yeah, I'm going to be anxious because I fear the judgment of others, as opposed to my focus being on my relationship with my kid and creating.
Sure they have kid time and are able to play safely in the place where
Right.
there's no space.
Right, and just just to enjoy life with kids, go to the park and have a good time, and not be frightened about what will happen. Not just because it could hurt my child, not because, but
Is this anxiety of like all the judgment and doing the right thing and so much information
Yeah.
and how to be the best
right,
mom
right,
is creating a generation of like
Right.
very anxious.
right.
It's also why I'm glad I don't live in America, because America's 100 times worse.
Yeah.
100 times worse.
Besides all the other stuff.
Besides all the other stuff, but besides judgment, like I feel like I become more anxious as moms. I was never like this.
Right.
Now it's like, will she run to the street? Will someone kidnap her? Like all these things that like we don't think of.
And you don't even know what's real anymore. Like
No.
when it first came out about all the kidnapping stuff,
Kidnapping, terrorism, like you can't not
No, but you don't know like what's media fed and what's like topless based on facts, so it makes you crazier.
Right. Because you're not getting any clear. You're still in chaos. Like you have no understand. There's no clarity. There's no order. What's normal? What's not? Pressure. There's a lot of pressure about getting it right, and pressure, and nobody's actually helping me. Nobody's helping me understand, and it's all based on this expectation of, getting it right and being perfect. We're going to get to that at the end. So I won't talk more, scaled responses, response bias. These are problems also with self-report measures. This is something you learn as well as a psychologist in, your statistics class and then your.
Can I just say something about this though? Even though, like, at some point I wore my social worker's hat when I got this, and I was like, how can you diagnose me with postpartum depression after the questionnaire? The fact that my partner was present and he heard that I might be feeling a certain way, even though it wasn't the way I wanted him to hear it or anything, it kind of it
caused him
to have like a little conversation afterwards. I mean, he was aware, like we're very close and we're very communicative, but for me it was like, okay, so someone's saying that, something has changed, like psychologically post-birth. It doesn't mean that I'm diagnosed with something, it just means that there's something that has changed. And, it's not only the conversation that we're having at home about it, all of a sudden there's someone else who's like...
That's right.
So that was actually very validating.
Yes.
But
Yes. So let me be clear. Let me be super duper clear. When I'm talking about how do we know what we know about postpartum depression, I just want to bring a critical eye to it. Let's be more critical of this. I want to be critical as a scientist. I want to be critical of the information that I'm studying, and the information that I get. Whoa, wow, you see how heavy that is? In the DSM, I'll talk about that in a second. You have to, and ask ourselves, which I always ask, what really matters here? And especially as a mother, what really matters here? So, if you leave it with anything from today, what really matters is you. Full stop. You matter. Your well-being matters. And not just because you're postpartum and you might be crazy. Not like you're at risk, or because you might cause harm to your baby, but because your well-being matters. And not just 12 months after birth in the postpartum period, but beyond that. There's something I didn't share before, so I'm going to come back to it. This is really important. Rachel, I told you about this, and I said I was going to share a study that the understanding is that once you're past those 12 months postpartum, everything should be fine. And this is something really important I want to stand from the rooftops and call out. If we don't pay attention and we don't get help, the help that we need, then it doesn't go away just because 12 months is up. Because it's not necessarily hormonal. It's not just hormonal. There are predictive factors for reliable predictors of postpartum struggles, which include social economic disadvantage. So being an immigrant, for example, increased stressful life events like immigration. I'm saying this because many of us are Olim. Who's not an Olim? We're all Olim. We're all immigrants. Death. I have people messaging me and saying, I'm postpartum and someone just died. We should also add, postpartum doesn't need to say, I think, someone mentioned this, maybe Rachel, it was you. Stillbirth. What if the baby's not alive? Can I still be postpartum? Stressful life events, not just during the pregnancy or postpartum, but even before. Sexual abuse, sexual trauma, accidents, any other trauma in life can come up during this time and can be significant. Marital conflict. So where you said, I had a partner because I have a supportive relationship, and it was the reflection in our relationship that helped me reflect inward and recognize that, hey, I am important. This does matter. Because that's ultimately what the conclusion we come to. Hey, this matters. Because until then, we're just pushing it off, and we're not acknowledging it. Hi, Leah, come on in.
Hi, sorry.
Single parenting is a predictive factor. Lack of familial and or social support, both practical and emotional. So you can live in the same city as your parents or your in-laws, but you may not get the emotional support that you need. You may actually get the opposite. It's like, so I can read your mind. Previous episodes of depression or anxiety, and that's assuming if you even know about it then. Because I'm talking now about this, we're putting attention now just, not just, but we're using this as a springboard, this period in my life. And we're learning that, hey, maybe beyond is important. And I'm also going to suggest, hey, maybe before was also important. And maybe now it's all coming up, and which I mentioned to you, right, Daniela? Like, all these things that, mattered before, we didn't pay attention to. Now I have to pay attention to it. Because, one, practically, I have a human being I need to look after. And there are emotional demands on me, and there are physical, practical demands on me. Also, because instinctively what happens to me, biologically what's happening to me, how I'm wired as a woman, as a mother, to respond to this life change. It's evolutionary. It's how we procreate and keep babies alive so they can go on. We're just instinctively driven that way. Right, so if you know about previous episodes of depression and anxiety, which I didn't know about. I didn't know that. It was only when I healed years later, a decade after my daughter's born, that I realized, holy shit, I've always been anxious. I've always been anxious. The world has never been a safe place for me. Thank you, Eliana, that's very validating. It's never, oh God. Now, obviously, the paradox is, obviously, it's hard to notice that because it doesn't feel safe to recognize that. But when you get help and you're in a supportive environment and relationship that gives you that opportunity to reflect inward and uncover that, it's much easier to recognize and to look after yourself. And that we go out of this stage of survival, because I need to keep my baby alive, and I can't let anyone know that I'm struggling. Like, I'm trying to survive the criticism and judgment of society. Not just my own internal world and my own internal judgments and my own fears around just keeping a baby alive. I'm not feeling much of a chuka, like a desire to talk about the DSM, but I will just quickly speak about this because we are in mental health awareness week. That, me and Carolina, when we first connected, we were talking about mental health and we were talking about stigma. This judgment that keeps us from getting the help that we need. And so I want to talk about this idea of postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. Now, similar to the whole category of maternal mental health, which we spoke about, the value is that, okay, we have a word for it. At least we know it's important. It exists. When we make a word for it, it exists. And it helps us make sense. And it's organizing. It helps us organize things when we have a word for it. But it's limiting because, come on in. Hi. What's your name? Betty. Hi. Good to meet you. And this is Leah, everybody. So even though it's validating, when the diagnosis leads, when we're looking when we're looking for the problem and we're looking to tick boxes, and we go online, and a mom goes online, and she's not feeling great, and she goes online, and she's following, she's looking at the list, like I did, right? She may not fit the boxes. So if I don't fit the boxes, then am I still okay? And so it's important that on one hand, it depersonalizes sort of the experience and the complexity of the experience. It also adds stigma to it, because when we look at mental health, we think of mental illness. And when we think of mental illness, we think of being sick. Nobody wants to be sick, and nobody wants to be the sick one. And that heightens my sense of threat, that I might be unwell. Uh-oh.
If this was the norm, then every person goes through it, just there's different levels and degrees of
Right.
how well you're coping versus how much help you're getting.
Right.
It would be a lot more
That's
normal.
right. That's right. Because everyone's doing well. I'm the one who's not doing well.
For instance,
Right.
the 12 to 14 week maternity leave is just not enough. I mean, that's
That's right.
it's just not.
It's really not enough. It's not enough.
And
there's-
to
and-
tell
and-
the whole society, the whole world that like you should be well after 3
Mhm.
months and able to
Mhm.
cope with
Mhm.
a full-time job,
Right.
it's just not fair.
Right. And we're not even, we haven't thought about paternity leave. What about paternity leave? Which is a whole other, which is part and parcel, but also another kettle of fish. I was calling it a cuddle of fish for years. Do you know the saying, a kettle of fish? Do you know kettle of fish? I called it a cuddle of fish.
It's kind of a word.
Well, you cuddle.
Oh, that's
But-
okay.
In Australia, they use they use it a lot, cuddle, and I thought it was cuddle of fish. Maybe it was an accent thing that I missed it. It's a kettle. It's a kettle of fish. Anyways, live and learn. So I'm going to read this just because I'm suddenly distracted. Even though it's validating when diagnosis leads, when it's the leader, when we're looking to diagnose, it depersonalizes the complexity of postpartum as well as stigmatizes mental well-being, which means women's suffering goes unrecognized and untreated. So instead of being, do I have postpartum depression? Do I have this? Do I have this? The question is, how am I doing? How am I doing? Just checking in, how am I doing? And valuing that. And normalizing that you're probably not going to do well. Or I shouldn't say that. I should say, maybe you're not, and that's okay. That this is out of the norm. That this is not normal behavior. Is the general sense that we get when we think about postpartum. We're all trying not to be postpartum because it's stigmatized. There's a failure to it, like all mental health. Okay, so what's happening for mom and baby? And this is getting back to what you were talking about. Like, what changes? Like, what changes in myself? I didn't give you papers. I'm so sorry. No, that's okay. Sorry, I'm disorganized here. Here, you take these. Pardon me? What's that?
You don't have enough? That's fine.
No, I do. I do have enough. Here you go. Okay, so I've recorded this, Betty, Leah. If you want to see the beginning, it's on my Facebook page. Who just walked out? Julie. Okay, so what's happening for mom? This is complex. I'm going to take really complex ideas, and I'm going to just really concentrate them. And I'm going to try not to get confuse myself, okay? It's complex for me because it's interwoven. Because what we're going to talk about here now is our relationship with a baby. Because now this, in some ways, it's this blob. This sweet little blob. Smells yummy. Makes me feel warm and cuddly, most of the time. Assumingly. Maybe not. But, what is this thing? What is this thing? What is this thing? So let's understand for a second, what is this thing? This baby comes into this world. This vulnerable baby comes into the world. And
Can I turn my air up a tiny bit? Is it freezing? Yes.
do you want to sit here? This is a cold spot.
No, she doesn't want hot.
Oh, I thought you wanted to, turn it up, meaning
Corner up temperature.
the heat up,
Is
yeah.
that okay with everyone?
Please, yeah, I'm freezing.
Okay, wait,
I'm freezing.
yeah, right? It just doesn't seem
No,
to
I
be
either
right.
turn it off.
You want to turn it off?
No, it's just I won't like balance.
But it's not balanced.
It's not balanced. It's all or nothing. It's all or nothing. I'll start in my room. I mean, you can put it.
Flex, play with it. I don't mind. Play with it.
Okay.
Play with it. So when a baby is born, this baby comes into this world, okay? This is a whole human being. It's like a whole human being comes into the world. And even though they don't say much and they really don't do much but eat, poop, and sleep and cry, it's a whole human being. And it used to be thought that they didn't do much, that they really didn't do much. And now we know that there's a lot going on in a baby's brain. Like a baby's brain is you can probably correct me, Leah. Leah's a clinical psychologist. She has 30 years experience as a psychologist. So I really do invite you to correct me. The concentration of neurons in a baby's brain is higher than it will ever be, ever again in its life. Like, here's everything, and now let's, use it or lose it, basically. And what isn't used is done away with. So, in fact, babies who are, for example, babies who are neglected, babies who are neglected, not physically neglected, but emotionally neglected, who don't have emotional interaction and from birth. I think I want to move, Leia. I can't see you. For example, children, always an example that comes up are in the Romanian orphanages. There was this communist ruler, dictator, I don't know what you call it, in Romania during the 80s, maybe even before, and birth control wasn't permitted. Birth control was illegal. You can get birth control, a lot of babies being born, unwanted, orphanages bursting. Also, there were some repercussions for having more kids. I can't remember. Someone would probably correct me. But people did not want their babies. A lot of unwanted babies. Orphanages are bursting. 1 carer to 40 children. Babies are getting their diapers changed. They're getting bottles propped, and that's it. No interactions, no cooing, nothing. And they suffered. Many of them failed to thrive, which is called failed to thrive. Their brains, when brain scans were done, you could see the actual sizes of the brains were significantly smaller. They didn't develop. They weren't developing. These children often showed cognitive delays, as well as there's actually just had this emotional burst. There's a radio show I listened to from the ABC, which is the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. It's called All in the Mind. It's a really great podcast. And they were talking about this, and an orphan from the Romanian orphanages who was adopted into an Australian family or maybe an American family talks about his experience, and he says, till today, I can't have relationships. He really struggles in relationships because he never had them in those primary years. So these primary years are important. We kind of all know this, right? This has become known to us. We know this, at least intellectually, that the first years of life are important. These are the years where our children's, it's not make or break. My husband added this, so it's to his credit. He's like, but you can heal, right? I said, yes, that's important. Healing, there's healing, because this can get scary, especially when a mom is worried she's going to ruin her kid, oh God, there's so much pressure. Take a breath.
You're forming them as human
Right,
beings.
okay.
Beyond baby years, toddler years.
Right.
I get sad sometimes because I think that my daughter's not going to remember all these awesome memories that we're forming, or outings on Cholamoid, and then my husband, God bless, it's but she's forming herself as a person.
Yofi. Nachon. And he's a cool guy. Yes, yeah, and I hope that gets picked up on the page, that it's not about the memories. These memories are actually forming the person. And that's very much what Motherhood in the Making stands for. It's about the relationship. It's about the person. And it starts with me as a person. That's the conclusion. So if I don't make sense at all today, that's the conclusion. It starts with me as a mother, that I have a positive relationship with myself so that I can nurture a positive relationship with my child. So this baby comes into the world, they're seeking connection, and they can also gauge mom's personality and emotions. They can also gauge it, and they're wired that way, to have a sense, and mom needs to be able to contain baby's earliest anxieties. Anxiety is normal. Anxiety is a normal part of being human. Anxiety is a normal part of childhood. The question is, when does it become dysfunctional? When is it so big that it's not uncontained? Now it's uncontained, and that it gets too scary, that I can't, that I'm not really in reality anymore. And I don't mean I'm in a, I've lost it out of reality, but like things are scarier than they really are. Some things are normal, like you can chime in, Leah, feel free. There's a monster in my closet. That's a normal part of child development, right? That's a normal anxiety in terms of our fantasies, our imaginations, and whatnot. And how do I make sense of it? How do I make sense of that? And how do I contain that anxiety? Am I saying that right? Am I using that right?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, it's the interpretation of what's occurring that affects the level of anxiety.
Right.
What you say, what you tell yourself about the events that are occurring in front of you, what thoughts you're having, and you can work it up or you can work it down.
Right.
As you said, anxiety is necessary in order to keep oneself safe. We have anxiety in order to scan the environment for potential dangers, whether they're physical, emotional, so on. But at the point where you start working it up and imagining things that aren't there, or catastrophizing, or thinking in black and white terms, and there's many ways that we work with anxiety, that's where it becomes actually dysfunctional and paralyzing.
Right. So anxiety.
The same is true for trauma. It's your interpretation of the event that it has more of an impact than the actual event. Like if you perceive you are about to hit by a car, you could also have PTSD, even if you weren't actually hit by a car.
And that's why telling our story, Julie, is so important, and talking about our story, because we need to make sense of it. We need to make sense of it. And that's what a mother does, a parent does. A parent helps a child make sense of their anxiety. So when a baby's hungry, or like they feel these hunger pains, or like they're getting hungry, like it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Like, oh my God, and the baby, and baby cries, and then mom comes and picks up baby. Oh, everything's okay. And with those experiences, everything's okay. If mom doesn't come, or if mom comes but mom's not okay, and mom has these anxieties, baby, who is tuned into mom's emotions, is going to be like, oh, okay, she's holding me, but this isn't okay, this isn't safe, this doesn't feel good. So that's why it's so important that mom feels okay, not for baby's sake, but for mom's sake. And what happens is that when a baby is born, suddenly there's this baby. As a mother, my experience is there's a baby born, I have a life to look after. It's a big deal. So like, what changes? Well, now you have a life to look after. That's a big deal. But more than that is now there's a balance of needs. Before, when I was single, it was all me. I love you. I know. I'm actually, no, I'm taking such, it's like pleasurable to see you just taking pleasure in your baby. It's really sweet to observe. Mom has to now balance her needs. And she has to balance her needs with the needs of baby and the needs of partner and other siblings or future siblings. And when I say future siblings, if you're nursing one baby and now you're pregnant. That happened to me. I had a baby nursing and then I was pregnant again. And now I have this conflict of needs. Whose needs do I meet? Do I need my need to feel like I'm not being drained? Do I meet big girl's needs to still stay close to mom? Now does my anxiety, what if she feels rejected? And then this baby inside in utero, like what about their needs? And now I'm being pulled in all directions, and that creates anxiety in me. So what happens many times is a baby is born, and my own anxieties are triggered. My often what are called, and this kind of, I feel uncomfortable when I say this, but I'm going to explain why. My primitive anxieties. This makes me uncomfortable for two reasons. One, because primitive seems like almost like an animal, and people. Okay. The other part is that when I say it, my imagination tells me people will reject that. It will put up people's defenses when they hear primitive and be like, I'm not like primitive. What do you mean primitive? But this is the fact. Okay, because we're human. We're human. It's actually
You could say basic.
Basic.
Yeah.
Or it's like from a biological perspective.
I know, but there's something about primitive that I also like. because it almost is like, it stings a little bit, and it kind of makes you think like, oh shit, yeah, that's true. Because at the end of the day, I actually would like to know your reactions to this. Like, we're part of the animal kingdom. We're part of the animal kingdom, and so we do have instinctual, basic, automatic needs and behaviors, right? What makes us human is that we can reflect on them. What makes us human is that, and we know this more. This is more part of like common knowledge about our brains and how they function, and our prefrontal cortex, and that in our neocortex, as opposed to a reptile, that we can contemplate, or even a dolphin. I mean, there's I don't want to create debate, but what makes us unique as humans, what makes us like dolphins are really smart. What makes us unique as humans is that we can reflect on our experience, that we have morality. There's empathy among animals. You see this among dogs, but it's different in human beings in that we can self-reflect and we can change. We can change.
Can I say something about the primitive? Because I actually, for me, it was very inspiring and empowering to feel so primitive, like, and to acknowledge how raw, like, especially during, like, while I was giving birth, and like the noise I was making and everything. It just like, I think when I'm too cerebral, that's why like things usually play against me, and self-judgment just comes out. But when I felt so like primitive, I was like, you know what? I'm connected to what's happening.
I'm connected. That's cool.
And I can fight it out, but this is where I am. And it was like very empowering for me to. So the primitive word, I understand like double, because there's a lot of bad mouthing about primitive. I'm from a third world country, so the word primitive I also take it very negative sometimes when people talk about us. Right. But this connection to like, again, the noise that I was making, the giving birth, the whole process of like, it just like want to take care of my kids, like as an instinct almost. Like I think it's also very empowering.
Right.
I mean, again, it has to go together with the self-reflection and everything.
Right. But when you think of the primitive, it's empowering to you.
How much?
Yeah. That my primitive was not a weakness; it was my strength.
How much?
Yeah. I appreciate that. So, and I'm also glad that is also one reaction that happens. But yeah, primitive is also where you say third world, less than, and that we have to be. But what you're also saying is, when I'm primitive, there's no judgment. It's just I'm in being. I'm just sort of automatic.
100%
Right. So I think this feels to me a little different in that sometimes in your primitive state, you're not in being. You're not really, and that it's in the primitive state that I'm talking about, it's harder to reflect on. Because what happens in this primitive state is I was born as a baby, too, and I had a primitive state as well. And depending on how my anxieties were tolerated and my experience, they've shaped me. They've shaped me. And now I'm a mother. And I thought this in the car or something, and I hope I can like regurgitate it. There's another good word. That I like picture myself making a right turn to bring my thoughts back. It was something. It made sense of this idea of how I'm in this world. The world is a scary place. I feel scared. I'm going to try to defend myself because that's what we do in anxiety, right? So I'm going to. Sometimes I might call out for help, but if no one comes to help me, then I'll flee. I might flee from it. I might run away from it. I'm going to try to defend myself from it, one way or another, if not physically, mentally. And that's where you have these defenses. And there are going to be and then, as I'm older and I'm conscious, like these are in my formative years, that I'm not aware of it. Now, in my adulthood, things happen, and I interpret, and like you're saying, like how you interpret your anxiety. I'm going to interpret my anxiety in certain ways based on how I've come to understand it and to learn to survive it. Because for me, my anxieties were really threatening because they were never contained. And things can cause anxiety, not just external events, but internal events can cause anxiety. For example, my sadness can cause anxiety. My emotional experiences can cause anxiety in me. I can get scared of them if there was a sense of threat when I experienced them. Don't cry. Or they were dismissed. I went into my son's gun, and I said to her, I'm trying to use English, I don't know why, but I can, because most people watching will be familiar with the sayat. And I said, I realized why I was sharing, yesterday when Nachshon, my son, I usually pick him up at 3, but I came at 4. He was waiting by the door already, and he was really upset. And he didn't want to go to gun. And then I realized, and I talked to him about it, and I reassured him that I'd be back at 3. And when I came into the gun, and I said it, almost to invite her to participate, we'll reassure him together. We'll be the safe adult. She's like, no, or like, oh, he's good. No, he's toughened up. He was, but he was fine after. I said to her, just because he wasn't crying anymore doesn't mean he wasn't scared. And so you know that I'm going to have a conversation with the Genenet, because this is an implicit problem that we and I say this about our children. I say this about us as women, that just because I don't look like I'm so sad, just because I don't look like I'm struggling, doesn't mean there isn't a storm inside of me, and we need to pay attention to that. And it's deeply rooted. What's happening for mom and baby is deeply rooted in my relationship with baby. Not always. Sometimes it's chemical. Let me just put it out there. Like, sometimes it's chemical. Sometimes it's chemical, and we need help with that. And sometimes it's hormonal. It's okay. So I don't want to dismiss that, but I need to, because this was something I learned in my training, and that is not common knowledge, and is not part of our, the conversation. That how is my experience being parented affecting my experience of being a parent? And I feel so, like, inside, I feel like I'm containing this power, because I feel very strongly about this, This is what I'm dedicated to, Motherhood in the Making. That we ask ourselves, how is my experience being parented affecting my experience as a parent? And the day I became a parent, it came at me like a tsunami. And it scared the shit out of me. And I didn't know that that's what was happening. And because I didn't know, I never thought to think, hey, maybe this isn't typical, or that it is typical, but it's okay. And so this is typical. It is typical to be confronted by the role of motherhood. That is typical. The question is, how am I experiencing that? Do I have support? Are there any other things going on in my life that might make it worse? These are the questions we need to be asking, not necessarily these self-report measures. I'd say those are the 4 questions that I would ask, and that I would encourage mothers to be asked by medical care professionals. Because those are important. What are my experiences being parented? Anyone else? Who's really paying attention? How am I experiencing that? How am I impacting? Is there anything? What support systems do I have in place? Are there any other events in my life that might be going on as well? Because everyone who's wrote me, I wrote in Motherhood in the Making in the group. I asked them if anybody would be willing to add very. My sense is what I'm reading here is not what's actually happening, because what I'm reading here measures is that it's like this, but I know it's so much more complex, and the way women understand it, the way they're making sense of it, is so different, and they're not in line. Which means that if I don't necessarily will be able to recognize if I need help, and I may not get the help that I need, and the people in helping positions may not be able to help me or recognize I need help and promote that. So when I asked, women were saying things like, well, one woman said, well, I gave birth, or when I was late in my pregnancy, there was a death in the family. My sister lost someone important to her in her family. I'm being very vague here just so that I don't identify anybody. Lost someone important to her in her family. I know you're all trying to figure out who it is now. Do I know anyone like that? Lost someone important to her in the family. And then I felt very guilty about my birth. And then, and this happened, and and this happened, and that happened, and this happened, and this was happening. And then this is what was happening physically for me. And then I felt like this. And it was, like I like this word, it was a shit show. It was a mess. It was a mess. And she knows it's a mess because she's like, I'll tell you what my experience was. And I could almost sense, listen to my story. Listen to this story. People don't talk about it. And you can look in the group. Some women wrote like this.
Yeah,
they wrote
I read
because I like, you know. And then someone else wrote, this really helps. This really helps. Like this helps. I said to my husband, I'm like, I'm going to write a book. Oh, and I said to, I think you may know Rebecca Sagala. I said, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book about like the nuances of women's experiences and how it's missed in society, you know, and how we don't really have a good idea. So when we come into it or we experience it, it seems like it's atypical. This is not normal. And then we're like, oh no. What's normal is that it's very broad. It's very eclectic. There are some guideposts, and that we're grateful for these guideposts, you know, that draw us to at least pay attention that this is real. But it's like there's a wide breadth of experiences, and we have to pay attention. Like that, you know, awareness means pay attention. Mindfulness, awareness, it means paying attention. Pay attention, which is the opposite of anxiety, which is the opposite of the fight or flight. And in our brains, the function is different. When we're in a state of anxiety, we're using our we're in a primitive state. We're trying to survive. As opposed to when we stop and we pay attention, we're activating the parts of our brains that allow us to self-reflect and to look in and to make sense and to integrate our experience. It's like the internal hug in some ways. It's the parent inside of you that says, tell me about it. Oh, yeah? Oh, you know, and the parent, the mom, the dad, the caregiver reflects back and says, oh, that sounds really, yeah, whoa, yeah, oh, so what did you do about it? And cares and wants to know more. So I don't know what time I said this ends. So I'm just conscious.
It said 9 to 11 on that thing, but I know we started a little bit late.
Right. Does anyone need to leave? I'm going to finish the... Okay. Whenever you need to go, you can feel free to go. There's the recording. You can always pick up the recording. What's that? What's that?
I walked
Oh, coming back, yeah. Okay, creating change. So I put here just treatment, just obviously women need to get help. You know, we need to get help. We need to understand that this is real, that it's important, and not just because it's for my kids' sake, but for my own sake, and that it's typical. It's typical. Not just because, and we're not just talking about sadness. We're talking about, holy shit, I'm a mother. Holy shit, I'm a mother. That is what we're talking about. And what happens in my mind. And for some, it's like awesome, maybe, you know. But for others, that in and of itself, and then add to it, I'm an immigrant, I'm alone, we're struggling, I have conflict with my husband, and all these other stresses. Everyone's dead. It heightens it. So mothering the mother. I saw this in a blog an article that wrote about how other cultures.
Take care of the new.
Yeah, there are studies that do show actually that rates of postpartum depression are actually higher in other cultures because it's more stressful, and maybe because the Western culture is infiltrating it. I don't know. I didn't look too deeply into it, but it's interesting to see. But nevertheless, a distinct postpartum period. So like you were saying, like 12 to 14 weeks. What is 12 to 14? Like what comes up for you in like 12 to 14 weeks?
It's just the survival period where you're just feeding the baby 24/7, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. So what's missing for you?
Another 3 months to like take care of yourself and recuperate from the birth.
Recuperate. Right. For me. Yeah, I need to
For the
recuperate.
mom,
Yeah. It's not just about looking
because
after the kid.
first you have to- Also, I don't know if you mentioned there's like a test that they gave. It's like the normal mother illness. If you gave a mom who's like 3 months pre-birth and 3 months after birth a psychiatric evaluation, then they would fail or be like really off the spectrum. Like between a few months before birth and a few months after birth, like it's normal that your brain is not functioning normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like this
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so that's like, that continues 3 months after birth. So if your brain is not even supposed to be functioning, how are you supposed to go back to work the next day?
Yeah.
Why there's a whole full trimester thing. You're supposed to
You're still pregnant,
you're supposed to, yeah, you're supposed to be still figuring it out. It always amazed me when you have all these checkups for your gynecologist when you're pregnant and there really should be checkups come out for you. A week after, and a month after, and 6 weeks after.
That's a great idea.
It would be awesome.
That is a very good idea.
I had a really hard time in my third trimester. I got diagnosed with gestational diabetes.
Mm.
And you have to go in for checkups every 2 weeks. But they're only looking at the baby. And I was like, at one point I was like, what about me? No one's thinking about me.
Right.
And it really
Right.
resonated. I was like,
Yep.
what to do?
Yep. So there are cultures where no one really pays attention to them. There's like somewhere in Asia where the pregnancy is not important. It's when baby's born that the mother. Then they pay attention to the mother because they're like, whatever that. There was something relevant about like her as a mom. Okay, so distinct postpartum period.
But also in Europe, they have a whole year.
Really?
Paid year maternity leave in some places in Europe, in Germany and Sweden.
I was gonna say the Netherlands.
Norway.
Canada also. Are you Canadian?
A full year, and they're already in Finland. They're already like realizing that the time to give the children like therapeutic interventions is like during preschool. So any kind of intervention that they need, like they're understanding that those first couple of years are the most important.
Welcome to the party. And it's a little frustrating. Does it frustrate you? Because it's so clear. I'm assuming it's very clear to you. It's almost like duh.
What I was thinking about was talking about was a psychoanalyst who's also a pediatrician called Maternal.
Yeah.
And he has this famous statement he made, there is no such thing as a baby. And what he meant by that was that you can never speak about a baby in the vacuum. It's as soon as the baby, not even as soon as it's born, while you're pregnant, the baby's already in a relationship. So you can never speak about a baby just as a baby, because automatically it's in relation to whoever's receiving that baby. And that baby's therefore going to grow, as you were saying, in relation to how it's encountered, how it's met, right? If it's a depressed face that's meeting it, so that's going to have an effect. And if it's an anxious body that's meeting it, or if it's very loving and mirroring, right, it's going to be. But the part that I would add, based on what you were saying, is that it's also true there's no such thing as a mother. Meaning that there's a two-way relationship happening here, and that the mother's being affected, not quite the same way as the baby, in the sense that the baby is in, quote, this more primitive state, and so the impressions are deeper, made deeper, because you're starting with raw material. But still, the mother's being massively affected in that sense there are two births. The baby's born and you are being reborn, right, as a mother, and also having all that stuff that you were alluding to, that is unfinished, unprocessed, and so on, in yourself as a child, being revivified, right, and being reaccessed, and then you have to process all that stuff. Right? But you're not so conscious of it, and you don't even know, as you were saying, Lisa, that this is normal, and to the extent that things are coming up that are really overwhelming, maybe you need to be spoken about with somebody. You have no idea that all this stuff is getting straight up and you're being reborn too.
And to build on that, the idea that a postpartum period of a woman ends at 12 months. And then she's no longer fits into the category of maternal mental health, and she falls off the radars, which I mentioned I mentioned this at the beginning, is an injustice. It's an injustice. It's an injustice to the child. It's an injustice to a mother. It's an injustice to society. And I'm like noticing as you're speaking, I feel so sad. And there's an injustice. There was a study done in Australia. There's a longitudinal Australian study of women's health. LASWH, that's what it's called. They started in the 1990s, they took 58,000 subjects. That is a huge, that's a huge N, that is a huge population. women who were born in the 20s, women who were born in the 70s, and women who were born in the 90s. So they have a huge set of, like a lot of data. Then someone came along and they said, well, let's survey a piece of this data. And they took 9,145 subjects. These women were born in the 70s. And they looked at them, and they looked at the women who had babies who were within 12 months of age, and women who had babies who were above 12 months. And they looked at their measures of life satisfaction. And wouldn't you know that the older your baby was, the less happy you were. Yes. And so it turns out that actually, as your babies are getting older and you have possibly more children, women's life satisfaction is going down. And this can reflect a lot of things, but I want to contribute the possibility that women are off. Hi, Shira. Women are off they're off the charts. They're off the charts. You don't matter. You don't matter. And so I want to bring the message: you do matter. You matter more than you think. And it's so important that you pay attention. And you pay attention here and now, where am I at? And that we consider the whole story. Me as a whole person, not a list, but as a whole person. What's my whole story? Because we have a story. And so the self-report measures, as I mentioned, the self-report measures are good, they're useful, they're helpful. They red flag, they bring attention to things. But it's not enough. We have to pay deeper attention. And it starts with honoring a woman's experience of motherhood. And so coming back to the sheet I handed out, social recognition of the vulnerabilities of women, that this is a vulnerable time for women, this period of my life, and also honoring her strengths from pregnancy, birth, and through postpartum period, that she is honored for it. There are cultures where a woman gives birth. There's one culture, I don't remember what it was, but the woman gives birth, and after a certain period, there's almost like a parade. She's bathed ritually, and she's like adorned in the finest beads and skins of the community, and she walks out into the square, into the town. It said town, so into the town, and people applaud her, and everyone praises her, and she's honored. And I'm like, well, just for like that day. But in general, there's a general feel. I'm all the. There's a general attitude that a woman, like, this is a big deal. This is important. This isn't, okay, next. She brought life into the world. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. There's that video. I don't know if you've seen it. I think it was like an advertising company for cards, and it was Mother's Day, and they had this. They had a marketing. I don't know what it's called. They were marketing their cards for Mother's Day. The hardest job in the world. This guy gets on for like a Skype job interview.
24/7 job.
The 24/7 job. You have to stand. Nope, there's no pay. And they're like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" They're like, "Oh, that's what your mom did." Oh my God, my mother! I love my mother. It's like, okay. I was like, this is a problem. This is a problem. First, like to monetize off of the fact that mothers are not valued. Send her a card. Send her a card. It's like, and that's not the point. The point isn't your mother. The point is me as a mother. Wow, this really shows how women as mothers are valued in society. That we don't even realize everything that they do, and we don't realize their value until you're interviewed for a crazy job. Like, to me, it was silly. I found it was cute, really good marketing. I'll buy their cards, obviously, but I'm gonna call my mother. But at the root of it, the message there is it reminds you that mothers don't really pay attention. We don't really pay attention.
I take it for granted. Obviously, my mother's going to be with me, or my parent is going to be here for me. That's what they're there for.
Mm-hmm.
They take care of you. When you reach the parenting stage and you realize how much your parent did, you're like, oh, I totally took it for granted.
Right.
And now I have to do it. My kids are going to take it for granted.
Right.
Or
right.
whoever.
Right. And that may just be that might be something we can't do anything about. That might just be sort of natural. But I think that is also influenced by society's perception of motherhood, the transition to motherhood, which is maternal mental health, and women's health, and beyond. And there's no category for that. There's no category for that. Functional assistance, you're saying, I need checkups. I need checkups. What about me? And I also found that. I found even my midwife, it's to a certain point. Like, we need to be checked in. We need to be checked in. But I think more than that, I think we need to change our general attitude as women. I think it starts with us in this room as women. We need to change the conversation around motherhood and what's normal and what's not and what really happens. And I hope that, you have a better sense. I hope I was clear and you have a better sense of, the big picture, that it's not just a list of symptoms. We're not ticking boxes. We are whole people with histories, and everything matters. And it's all important. And sometimes in this period of my life, a lot of things can come up. And maybe I might not fit the criteria, or maybe I do. Now what? Now what? And so we get help. Get help. I think we said something about this. Talk about it. We need to talk about it. We need to talk about it. We need to, as socially as women together, we need to talk more about it. And that's what the Motherhood the Making community is about on Facebook. Like, let's talk about this. I'm a huge proponent for therapy. Like, I'm a huge promoter of therapy. I think it can be very hard to find a good therapist. I think particularly it's a bit of a paradox. I wrote this in an article, and it's in the Motherhood the Making community. Is there anyone not in that group? Not in that group? Okay. I'll get you in that group. Or I'll share with you the blog I wrote. It's a bit of my story, but more about as a psychologist what I because I know my story is typical. And what I share is that it can be very hard to ask for help. Society's not offering it. That's why I say, functional assistance, more than 12 weeks off, more money to get more help, paternity leave, just the change in the culture around support in this time, the vulnerability of this time, but also getting help to make sense of the story, because we know from what's happening for mom and baby, and this relationship is complex and it's new and it brings out my stuff, and so I need an opportunity to make sense of my stuff. And so, Motherhood in the Making is also very much promotes, make sense of your stuff. Do it with me, do it with somebody, but do it. I do it, changes a life. It changes a life, and as a mother, in my role, it changes lives. It changes generations. So those are my thoughts. We can continue talking. I'm not running anywhere. But I want to thank you all again very much for coming and making the time. I know it's really not easy to come out to these things, so it really means a lot to me that you came, each of you. Does anyone have questions or want to comment on it?
I just want to say something. I know we'll continue the discussion, but I just wanted to also thank you, Lima, for I'm part of Motherhood. Motherhood is a team of Jerusalem Lights, whose purpose is to break stigma against people coping with mental illness and really start opening dialogue about mental health. And I really want to thank you. We sent a call for action 3 months ago, and we translated also to English and Arabic. And Liba, right away, she's like, you know what? I want to be part of this, and I want to talk about maternal mental health. And we had a really, really interesting conversation. We both got so excited. Hi, nice to meet you. We started talking about mental health and stigma, and mental health versus mental illness, and even starting the conversation, what you want to be identified with and not, and how the difference of how much we try to take care about our physical health, and how we can pinpoint things, and that's so much easier than pinpointing things or even honoring the support that we might need or our mental health in general. And I just really want to thank you for the space, for bringing all this into your community all the time, every day. And I think it's a very sacred space for mothers, and as a mom and also as a social worker and as a human being, I just think it's so crucial also to I think that's also part of some of the things that Eliana, she's a art therapist, and I've been part of her workshops, just honoring vulnerability and seeing the power that vulnerability holds. It's so so important. It's so important. And so much growth that comes out of that place. But we just have to nurture it.
Mhm.
And so thank you.
Thank you, and that comes back to what you're saying about being primitive and the vulnerability and how much strength there was and how much potential there was in that primitive vulnerability, and how stigma is the shame that smothers that potential, and it's important we talk about it. It's important we talk more and more about it. Yeah. Thank you all for coming. You're all free to leave if you need to go. Elena, you do workshop. What workshops do you do?
I've been on therapy workshops for women/mothers here in LLO.
Did you do it in the art room?
Yes.
Ooh, tell us more.
This year it's going to be on Tuesday evenings, starting next week.
How long does it go for?
It's going to go all year, hopefully. Last year, the women didn't want to leave, so it just kept going and going and going. So I'm just setting it up as a yearly thing. Maybe there'll be like semesters, so people don't have to commit to the whole year.
What is it,
It's a space where people can sit and create art together and then share about their experiences. When?
Yeah,
Tuesday evenings here at LLM.
What time?
It's going to be 6:30 to 8:30 this year.
Highly recommend it.
Good. Will you post in the Motherhood in the Making group? You have a flyer? Yeah.
What's your last name?
Cooper. You're LLM.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get help.
I'm sorry, and one last thing. Since I'm part of the shop, I know I was taking pictures. I haven't posted anything except one of you, because I wanted to ask for your permission. Just wondering if it was okay for me to just post a couple of pictures about how it was today, since that's what we're doing for all the 19 events that we have throughout Mental Health Week. Sure. Let me know if that's okay. If
Any
it's not
objections?
Okay, that's also okay.
Any objections? No objections.
To like just posting saying we were here.
We were here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I have